Let's talk about prisoners, because we've got a new report from His Majesty's Inspector of Prisons today, which has made it very, very clear that things are going horribly, horribly wrong in our prisons. His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, has issued a report saying that we're seeing an increase in violence against staff and against fellow inmates, and a lot of it is being fuelled by drugs and overcrowded conditions. We've got a lot of prisoners who are locked up for 22, 23 hours a day, often in cells that were meant for one. They're now for two. People, having a toilet in there, a bucket, and having their meals in there. And they're also hooked on drugs and daytime TV. That means they are not going to classes, they're not being rehabilitated, they're not getting skills that could perhaps mean they go back on the straight and narrow when they get out. Well, let's talk about all of this now with David Shipley. He's a writer on prison and justice issues, and indeed is a former prisoner himself. A very good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, does this new report from the Prisons Watchdog tell us anything we didn't already know?
I think it does, actually. I think it's easy sometimes to just tune this stuff out because we're always hearing how bad prisons are and how many drugs there are and how much violence there is. But actually, this is the first report covering time since Labour came to office. It covers about 9 months of the Labour government, and things have got dramatically worse. So that's the key thing here. It was very bad already. But it's got a lot worse.
Why? Why have they got worse in the last 9 months? Well, I mean, a new government doesn't make any difference to prison conditions, surely.
No, I think the issue is the system's been failing for a very long time because the leadership of the Ministry of Justice, the senior civil servants, are not fit for their jobs, and they are still in place. They're the sort of permanent administrative management and oversight of the prison
failure
system.
Isn't there also an issue? There is, I mean, it's just a huge issue in the whole of our criminal justice system and in prisons. Money does make a difference in terms of the ability to build more prisons. So they're building them now, but it's rather too late in the day, and there aren't going to be enough prison spaces. Pay for keeping and retaining and recruiting good quality, experienced prison officers and the facilities we've got. Where lots of people might say, "Oh, we want people to have a horrible existence behind bars," but if they're just sitting there smoking skunk all day, for 22 hours a day, that they're not going to likely to be coming out as productive members of society, shall we say?
Well, yeah, I don't think we have a prison system that's tough at the moment. We have a prison system that's wasteful. It costs £50,000 per person per year to have them staring at daytime TV and having a high chance of coming out more addicted to more drugs and more likely to commit crime. That doesn't benefit anyone. Money, the cutting of money has been part of the cause of this problem. Overcrowding is part of the cause. But actually, even if you could flick a switch tomorrow and have enough capacity, enough staff, and enough money for activities, the system would still be bad because it has a morally corrupt culture, because it's been penetrated by organised crime in many jails, because there is corruption, certainly up to governor level. We've seen cases in the news in the last year or two. And the civil servants within the Ministry of Justice are not succeeding collectively. I think the Ministry of Justice is particularly insular in government departments. Almost all of the senior people have been in the department for decades. They all are, very well connected. They know each other. Often they have social lives together. They even live in the same areas. Their kids know each other. And it needs shaking up. Ministers really need to look at bringing in better people from other departments.
Well, I mean, exactly. We've seen a litany of failure, which was just talk to us. If you talk about organised crime and corruption, we had a story yesterday about Islamist extremists sort of teaching organised criminals how to make bombs and the like, and the organised criminals telling them how to get hold of weapons and how to launder money. And they're like, this is a bad sort of nexus. But we've also got, the amount of drugs coming into prisons. They're getting in through visitors. They're getting in through prison guards, often on very low pay and not particularly motivated, and you offer bribes and that, even using drones. I think a lot of people who have not been behind bars find it utterly bizarre that you can't stop drugs getting into a prison.
You can stop drugs getting into prison, but it requires universal searching of everyone coming in and out. It requires proper anti-drone measures, so nets, people to shoot them down, staff working nights to go and intercept. It requires secure windows that haven't got holes in them. It's very basic stuff, but there is a complete lack of will and capability. And sometimes I think you have to look at, if a prison simply isn't putting in place netting to block drones. This is not a complex technical project.
It's not expensive.
This should be similar to, at a certain level, incompetence becomes indistinguishable from active corruption.
Is there actually an element of sort of, oh, you know what, let's just have them all out of their heads on drugs. They're easier to deal with, which I think might have been the case if everyone was on cannabis. But the skunk, a lot of these drugs people are getting hold of are actually incredibly strong and can actually make prisoners quite violent. Is that why we're seeing this upgrade in violence, partly?
Well, you're absolutely right that prison staff can sometimes just accept drug taking because it keeps people quieter. I saw that myself as a prisoner at Wandsworth, and you see it in prison inspection reports. Staff will smell cannabis or spice being smoked and just leave it, because actually if someone is comatose in their cell, they're not a problem.
Yeah.
The violence tends to come from drug debts which get incurred. Exactly the same when you get violence outside. So drugs cause violence because people are fighting over turf, because people are, wanting their debts paid, because people are trying to, maybe someone has incurred a debt and the way they pay it off is by being told to do some violence to someone else. You get all of this sort of stuff going on, which causes huge harm and can spill over into society. There are cases where people's parents, their mothers, have been sort of visited at home by criminals saying, your son owes us £3,000, you've got to pay it, or we're going to kill him.
And of course, there is that literally a captive market in prisons, so you can sell at a higher price and get that money somehow. I mean, what is the answer? You were saying we need a shake-up of the staff, shake-up of some governors as well. Is it lack of political will? Because is there an element where, a lot of them, there's not that many votes in, giving more money to prisoners, whereas in fact we know a lot of countries that do actually spend more on prisons can actually rehabilitate better. You have fewer people committing crime, which would actually impact us in the long term.
Well, I think the step that needs to be taken is ministers need to recognise that the Ministry of Justice leadership is collectively not working. There needs to be a serious effort to grapple with corruption. So the counter-corruption unit, which was set up at the Ministry of Justice 6 years ago, every year gets about the same number of cases of potential corruption, but fewer and fewer get referred to the police, which is really ominous, I think. And actually what we need is groups like the National Crime Agency and the security services being tasked to really look at the links between organised crime and prisons, and recognise that in some cases that will mean that governors are connected to organised crime. And they need to go after that.
You need to go right to the top. David Shipley, fascinated to talk to you, see it from both ends as a writer and researcher on prisons, but also former prisoner yourself. So appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed.